So today I'll be sharing about what the Brahma kumaris, or in other words, the Meditation Manhattan organization, the center for meditating, which is more than what meets the eye, more than what meets the mind at first glance or at first thought, and really recognizing that the biggest problems we have are not really knowing how to utilize the transformative energy that's around. That everything's always transforming in the physical realm, and when we become too much embodied, identified with our body, we are feeling like everything is controlling us. We're being transformed. We don't recognize necessarily our transformative power. So the body and the spirit separate when we die. Until then, we have to learn how to have real compassion for the soul from the body's perspective, and compassion for the body from the soul's perspective, or the spirit. And what happens? We go home to our true family and the peace and the light. We're still going to exist. We're going to go back or forward to love. We may get a new name, new body, new address, but the energy can never be created or destroyed. That's why we use the word transform. Soul-to-soul relationships do continue because they're what really matters. They're not body relations. It feels like home. It feels peaceful. So there's moments of that where we feel like we don't worry about dying. There's no before or after. And that's really how we get to remember where there's no time, nothing changes, it's okay. There's no beginnings or ends. It's an eternal feeling. It might be called flow. When the transformative energy is in flow, we're not necessarily identifying with some piece of everything. We're like this, that, the other. It's non-attachment. There's a genderlessness, a stillness, a racelessness, a religionlessness. It's supreme, pure and playful, bliss, benevolence, beauty. These are all ways we can understand non-attachment. It's really what we look at in children called secure attachment. They feel attached without having to do anything for it. And that's how it is in the virtuous innocence, the brilliance. Before we go home, for example, we could say it's like the diamond phase, the uplifting, the spiritual awakening. It's a confluence stage. Instead of a diverging, a confluence, we're reconnecting to our true self, our soul, with a godliness, which is like, God is like the zero of negativity. It's like the absence of negating me or you, or there has to be enough space for something. So we put an object there, there's not room for the other object. So God is like the zero, that it's not like competing with us for anything. There's no begging, there's no victimhood, there's no hatred, needs, expectations, demands, ego, vices, sorrow, ignorance, attachments, dependence, suffering, competition. When we are with God, we're like able to take up no space. And it's like we already mentioned, it's without the time. So there's really this essence that hasn't been in a form or a name, and we would say it's like an ocean of bliss. It's knowledge, purity. That's what bliss is. It's love, it's benevolence, and the supreme parent of all souls. It's literally and I think it's perfect. Today's Father's Day, so it's like the father of our soul. It's like not our biological father, it's our spiritual father. So if no one has our back, our spiritual father has our back, and that's why often everyone says Father, or Father in heaven. Now, in my tradition, we don't look at it as the Father in heaven who's like looking from afar. It is now here also in our every cell, experienced vibrationally when one connects with our soul, our source internally. It's like the animation of our body. We know I got our flesh, our bones, our whiteness of our skeleton is from our Father in our eyes, because it was a sperm drop and then became a body, eventually in the vessel of the mother, being a bridge for that flesh to become embodied, an embodiment casing for the transformative energy of an individual. And this connection when we're alive heals the soul and makes it so we can grow into true divine nature, that we are in belonging, this true eternal friendship or family. Now, obviously, if we have a spiritual father, we have spiritual sisters and brothers and loved ones. And it knows us in a way that no one else will ever know us, because there's absolute acceptance. Like, the Father is supposed to be a representation of that true backdrop of where I could melt into it and not feel separated. I can melt into my Father means that I can be myself and be absorbed completely in his fullness of his fatherhood, that I'm just a piece of him, even though I'm my own self. And that's the combination of our divine birthright, the flow, alignment, peace, serenity, love, joy, and connection, and yet being as humans in this physical world that we are like God. It's why we feel, it feels like home, it feels like me, it feels like good. And yet we're always like reaching for that, because as we all know, our fathers are also humans that could not be fully absorbed into their fathers and their mothers and so on. So each one individually has this masculine versus feminine experience. And I'm going to just speak about it very, almost harshly, but very like frankly in bullet point. And this is like for me, but we could say, now removing kind of the word father from this and just saying masculine and feminine. The feminine here is, in all of this, the observer, like the one that says, love me, to the Father in heaven, is the soul that's saying, I need the acceptance. So if any of us feel like we relate, and anyone does, to experiencing of having a father, being like the daughter is being like the soul, or being like the wife. The woman is like the adopted daughter of her husband in a way. So he has to be able to provide for her and have her back, in that sense that her back is relaxed. She can let her guard down, not look over her shoulder, and not need to have eyes in the back of her head. And that allows her to shine in her best self. So really this is raising us up to be like the wife, or to be like the sister, whatever you are relating to at this moment. So flexibility versus rigidity, light versus dark, boundaries versus openness, proactive versus responsive, shining and emitting versus reflective receptive, provider versus processor, seducer versus pursued, protector versus precious, boundary setter versus shapeshifter, chooser versus chosen, womb versus penetrator, water carrier versus sprinkler, nurturing versus the nurturing versus sculptor, flexor versus stretcher, witness versus performer, sun versus earth, goddess and God. I want to make a comment here. When we say goddess in this context, we're referring to the divine feminine presence. So this is the ability to be rigid or flexible. The beingness is what we call Shekhinah. It's God's presence. So goddess here is not to say separate from God that there's a goddess and a God. It's saying it's the feminine and the masculine. The Father in heaven's daughter's self, as yet God is beyond the family system, so it's really both. Okay. Vessel or receptacle versus flutter or projector, line versus multifaceted, and finally the indwelling versus the endless. And what is being here now? It is attention on the presence for perception. It's releasing the need for retention. It's indivisible. It's removing intention, which removes tension. Sanitization of the mind is for sanity. Acceptance that we don't need to change, keep, or link anything. That we are not going in or out. We are not anything going in or out. We're not ruled by appetite. It's the noticing of images, thoughts, and feelings. It's being unassociated with them in the noticing. It's allowing preconceived I, in quotes, I, like who I am, notions to flutter in and out as a witnessing. Its eyes shut or open makes no difference. It's agreeing to what is peace. I have dignity and grace and strength in the here and now, being here now. And that being pitied is not up to us. They get to choose if they pity. Thank you. Be well.